Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission right now is to explore the architecture of pure, inescapable psychological dread.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We are breaking down a highly detailed, meticulously scheduled story script.
Right. It's titled Flight 109 to Inevitable.
And this isn't just, any standard narrative text we're pulling from today.
No, definitely not.
Our source material is a really comprehensive script breaking down 11 specific scenes for a digital comic.
Wait, so like a webtoon, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But it is packed with vivid art direction, lighting cues, and this really specific, highly unusual dual voice audio format.
Right, which is designed to completely trap the reader in the protagonist's nightmare.
It really is.
Oh, wait, pause right there before we get into the story itself.
Here.
A
Oh.
digital comic. Because usually those are just long vertical scripts of art you scroll through on your phone, while you're waiting in line for coffee or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's the standard format.
So how does a static scrolling comic have two simultaneous audio voices? I mean, is this actually an animated video we're talking about, or is there an embedded audio track?
It is an embedded dynamic audio track. Modern digital comics have really evolved lately.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, creators can use HTML5 and specific coding so that as you, the reader, physically scroll down your screen, passing certain pixel thresholds triggers specific sound files.
Okay, wow.
So what the creator of the script has done is layer two completely different audio tracks that play simultaneously as you scroll through the artwork.
That sounds incredibly overwhelming.
It is. It places a heavy cognitive load on your brain because you are trying to process conflicting auditory information while visually taking in the horror.
Right.
It basically forces you into a state of active physiological anxiety.
Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. It essentially weaponizes your own phone against you.
Exactly.
So with that technical baseline established, imagine this. You know that feeling when you're waiting at an airport gate really early in the morning?
Oh, yeah. It's that strange liminal space.
Exactly. The air is totally still. You've got those sickly fluorescent lights humming overhead.
Right, and you're just existing in this boring, mundane pocket of time.
Yeah, it feels safe, a little lifeless. But imagine if that sterile wait wasn't just a layover.
Right,
Imagine if it was a literal countdown to your own violent death.
which is terrifying.
And worse, imagine you already know exactly how the plane is going to crash, down to the millisecond, because you have lived through this exact morning thousands of times before. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, we have to start with the baseline of this universe before any of the real action even kicks off.
Right, the ground rules.
Exactly. The story establishes its ground rules immediately in the opening sequence. We are placed in Terminal B.
At exactly 7:00 a.m., right?
Yes, the clock reads exactly 7:00 a.m., and the art direction calls for a hyper-realistic eye-level shot across a bleak, empty lounge.
Washed in that sickly green, gray, fluorescent light.
Yeah, it is specifically designed to look diseased.
Right. And sitting right there in the foreground is our protagonist, David.
Yes.
He is a 50-year-old traveling executive.
Yeah.
He's wearing this wrinkled navy suit, his hair is graying, and he is slumped in one of those incredibly uncomfortable perforated metal airport chairs.
Oh, I know exactly the ones you mean.
Yeah, the worst chairs ever. And the script specifically describes him as looking like a man being physically crushed by an invisible weight.
Mm-hmm.
Beside him is a styrofoam coffee cup, and the dark liquid inside is trembling. Just slightly.
That trembling coffee is such a brilliant piece of visual foreshadowing.
Because the engines haven't started yet.
Exactly. The engines of the airplane haven't even started yet, but the coffee is already vibrating.
Wow.
From a psychological standpoint, this represents how the trauma of the end of the loop, the violent crash, is actually bleeding backward into the beginning of the loop.
Right.
David's nervous system is anticipating the destruction. But the true genius of this opening setup is that dual voice audio format we just talked about.
Right, right. First, you have what the script calls the scenario voice.
Yes.
It is described as clinical, detached, subtly oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
It speaks with the cadence of an automated airport PA system, but it's narrating David's tragedy.
Like calmly stating, David sits paralyzed in the harsh fluorescent glow.
Yes. It's the voice of objective reality.
The voice of the universe. And it immediately signals to you, the reader, that this universe is completely indifferent to human suffering.
And then layered underneath that coldness, you hear David's voice, which the script refers to as the ghost.
Right.
This audio track is deep, raspy, and vibrating with a mix of cynical exhaustion and suppressed primal terror.
Yeah, through this inner monologue, you hear him gag at the smell of industrial floor wax.
Yeah.
You hear him wonder if he has been sitting in this exact same metal chair for decades or maybe centuries.
And he tells you right up front that he knows exactly what happens at 8:125 a.m.
The human brain just really struggles to reconcile these two inputs. You have the scenario voice calmly dictating the facts of the environment, and David's voice providing the subjective, agonizing emotional reality.
Right.
The friction between those two tracks creates an immediate, suffocating tension.
It is like if you had a high-end smart home system, but instead of just telling you the morning weather or turning on the kitchen lights, this cold, automated voice calmly narrates your absolute worst nightmare while you're actively living it.
That is a great comparison.
Right. It just casually announces the digital clock strikes 7:0 a.m. while you are internally screaming for your life.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder if the inevitable plane crash is actually the worst part of this story, or if the true torture is this quiet, agonizing anticipation in the waiting area.
What's fascinating here is how that clinical voice systematically strips away David's humanity.
How so?
Well, by describing his physical posture in the exact same monotonous tone it uses to describe the smell of stale coffee or the glare of the digital clock, the scenario voice reduces David to an object.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He isn't a person with agency, hopes, or fears. He is just another mechanical component required for the flight. He is essentially a piece of living luggage.
Okay, but if I am David, and I know for a fact that the plane I am about to board is going to fall out of the sky, I am not just sitting there accepting my fate as living luggage.
Right, of course not.
My human instinct is going to kick in. I'm going to rip up my boarding pass and run as fast as I can out the front doors of that airport. Does the script account for that instinct?
It absolutely does, and it uses that exact instinct to devastating effect.
Oh, boy.
It addresses the illusion of choice, beginning with the boarding pass itself. The art direction demands an extreme close-up of David's white-knuckled hands gripping the ticket for Flight 109, Gate 14.
Okay.
But there is a crucial, surreal detail. The black ink on the ticket looks wet.
Right. The script notes that it bleeds into the crisp white paper like an open wound.
Exactly.
Which creates this immediate subconscious association with physical violence. The ink isn't just dye, it represents the blood he is going to shed.
That is exactly right. And through his frantic voiceover, David explains that he has tried everything to get rid of this piece of paper.
Right. He has torn it into confetti.
Mm-hmm.
He has burned it to ash in the bathroom sink.
Yeah. But the universe simply reaches into his pocket and places a fresh, perfectly crisp ticket right back in there.
He calls it his anchor. It is the physical object tying him to the sky.
Because a boarding pass is traditionally a contract, your permission to travel.
Right.
But here, it is a contract that cannot be broken by the passenger. It functions as a localized curse.
Wow.
But you are entirely right about human instinct. Even knowing the ticket always comes back, David still tries to fight the physics of his reality.
Yeah, we see him launch into this fierce, panicked rebellion.
Yeah.
He shoves himself out of the chair and aggressively marches against a tide of blurred, faceless business commuters.
Right. He is fighting the current.
Exactly.
Good.
He locks his eyes on a sign that reads, Ground Transportation, Exit, pointing toward a set of heavy revolving glass doors.
Mm-hmm.
And his logic is flawless here. If you were reading this, you agree with him. If he could just step foot onto the concrete sidewalk outside, the timeline has to break.
Right, because the plane cannot crash with him in seat 8F if he is currently sitting in the back of a taxicab heading downtown.
Exactly. But the architecture of this universe is merciless.
Entirely merciless. When he hits those revolving doors and pushes violently through the glass, he does not step out into the morning air. Space simply folds inward on itself.
Yes, the spatial warp.
Yeah.
He pushes through the exit, expecting the street, but the scenery seamlessly distorts around him, and he emerges directly back into the brightly lit, sickly green terminal.
It is horrifying.
And he doesn't just end up anywhere, right? He is standing immediately in front of the counter for Gate 14.
Exactly.
And the Ando boarding sign above the desk is pulsing with a commanding blood-red light.
Psychologically, this is so much worse than if the doors were simply locked.
Right, because if a door's locked, you can break a window.
Yeah.
You still have a physical problem to solve.
Exactly. But by warping space, the universe demonstrates that David's agency is a complete illusion. Letting him try to escape, only to instantly fold him back to the starting point, is a recognized component of trauma loops.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it systematically breaks the subject's spirit, conditioning them for learned helplessness.
That is wild. It's like playing an open-world video game and hitting that invisible boundary wall at the edge of the map,
Yes, exactly like that.
or when a game glitches and suddenly teleports your character back to the center of the zone.
Mm-hmm.
But the crucial difference here is that a glitch is an accident. This universe's spatial warp feels entirely intentional. It's a targeted dragnet.
It is very targeted.
It demands this specific man for this specific seat. Why him? Has he done something wrong?
The core existential dread of this narrative is that there is no why provided. The universe does not owe David an explanation, a moral lesson, or a chance at redemption. He is simply required. And because his attempt to break the physical boundaries of the space failed so completely, he is forced to move forward through the funnel.
Right.
He has to interact with the environment, which brings us to the terrifying realization of who or what is sharing this loop with him.
Yeah, we meet the gate agent. David hands her his bleeding ticket.
Right.
She is dressed in a crisp, professional blue uniform, but the overhead lighting is directed so harshly downward that her eyes are completely hidden in pools of black shadow.
It is such a creepy visual.
Very. The art notes describe her smile as jagged porcelain.
And in his internal monologue, David likens her to a mortician who already knows his coffin measurements.
Ugh, it's chilling.
She isn't checking a passenger in for a flight. She is processing a body for the grave.
Wow.
And the automated scenario voice chimes in exactly as she scans the ticket, describing the sharp beep of the barcode scanner as a mechanical confirmation of his doom.
It is incredibly claustrophobic.
It really is.
And that tightness only amplifies when we transition to the interior of the airplane itself. The lighting shifts from the sickly green of the terminal to a suffocating jaundice yellow.
Mm-hmm.
David is crammed into window seat 8F. And sitting right next to him in the middle seat is an elderly man in a heavy brown overcoat.
Right.
This man is staring perfectly straight ahead with unblinking, milky eyes.
He is described like a wax figure beginning to melt under hot lights. He never speaks. He never acknowledges David. He doesn't even blink.
David actually shares a chilling deduction with the reader at this moment.
Yes, he
He
does.
admits that he doesn't think any of these people are real. He whispers, "Sometimes I think they're just props the universe put here to watch me burn."
Yeah.
And honestly, looking at the descriptions, it's like there are animatronics on a dark theme park ride. But they aren't just there for decoration.
No, they aren't.
They act as the immune system of this timeline. They enforce the rails of the ride. If David tries to step out of the cart, these props mechanically process him back onto the track. So are these figures meant to be fellow human souls trapped in the same loop, or are they literal, mindless manifestations of the timeline?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it taps into the very real human fear of profound isolation in a crowd.
Oh, yeah.
Think about having a panic attack in a crowded public place and nobody stops to help you. The world just keeps moving.
That is a terrible feeling.
Right. True horror often stems from being surrounded by entities that look perfectly human, wearing the airline uniforms, carrying the briefcases, but who completely lack empathy or conscious awareness.
Right.
If they're just props, David is entirely alone in his suffering. If they are fellow trapped souls, they have been so broken by thousands of crashes that they have become totally catatonic.
Man, that is bleak.
Either way, the apathy of the crowd is a direct extension of the apathy of the universe. Nobody is coming to save him.
And that total apathy is what makes the buildup so agonizing for the reader. You are just waiting for the shoe to drop. Which brings us to the moment the tension finally snaps. The exact time David warned us about at the very beginning of the deep dive. The 8:44 a.m. trigger.
Up until this exact moment, the horror has been largely atmospheric and psychological.
Right, it's been the bleeding ink, the shadowy eyes, the impossible revolving doors.
Exactly. But when the clock hits 8:15 a.m., the violence abruptly begins. The fasten seatbelt sign illuminates with a harsh, glaring crimson light that violently slices through the yellow gloom of the cabin.
And because David has lived this thousands of times, his knowledge of the timeline is exact to the millisecond.
He is literally counting down the catastrophe in his head.
Right, he knows the port engine dies first. We hear his raspy voice track counting. 3, 2, 1. He knows that exactly 3 seconds later, the starboard engine surges, catches fire, and violently tears itself apart.
The visual composition of the comic shifts drastically here to mirror the mechanical failure of the plane.
The art just goes crazy, right?
Yeah. The perspective is thrown wildly off balance. Gravity suddenly inverts. The overhead luggage bins burst open, and the script explicitly notes that the heavy suitcases become deadly, high-speed shrapnel inside the cabin.
The yellow oxygen masks drop from the ceiling, and the imagery used is horrifying.
Yes.
They are described as dead, hanging snakes.
Just awful.
The old man in the heavy overcoat next to David is thrown brutally forward against the seat in front of him. The entire cabin is shuddering violently, and David's voiceover mentions the screaming of the other passengers. He calls it terrible, useless screaming. He notes that they don't fully understand what's happening yet, but he does.
And amidst all of this kinetic, screaming chaos, the script delivers what might be the most striking visual of the entire narrative.
Yeah.
It provides a poignant, almost impossibly quiet contrast to the surrounding destruction.
Here's where it gets really interesting. With shrapnel flying through the air and gravity pulling the cabin apart, David is perfectly still.
Completely still.
He is pressed against the small, scratched oval of the airplane window. He completely ignores the yellow oxygen mask swinging violently against his shoulder.
Yeah.
He isn't screaming. He is just staring out the glass at the curvature of the earth and the green fields below, which are rushing upward at a dizzying, impossible speed.
His inner monologue in this specific moment is incredibly dark, but logically sound within the framework of his reality. He simply asks, what's the point of breathing for an extra 12 seconds?
Wow. He finds the plummet almost peaceful.
Yeah.
He says it's the only time he knows the rules won't change. You really have to stop and unpack this massive psychological paradox. I mean, how can the human mind find ultimate peace and comfort only during a terrifying, catastrophic free fall toward an agonizing death?
Because the free fall is the absolute only moment of certainty he is granted. Think about the psychology of anticipation versus the event itself.
Okay.
When you are waiting for terrible news, the anxiety of not knowing when or how it will arrive is agonizing.
Yeah, the waiting is the worst part.
Exactly. Throughout the terminal, David was plagued by the anxiety of the illusion of choice. He was exhausting himself trying to figure out how to escape.
Right. Burning tickets, running through doors, dealing with the psychological torture of false hope.
But once the plane's engines explode and they are falling, the illusion of choice is finally gone. The agency is completely removed.
The worst thing has already begun happening.
Right, which means the exhausting work of trying to prevent it is over. The frantic anxiety of the unknown is replaced by the twisted, quiet comfort of the absolute inevitable.
It is incredibly bleak. Surrendering to the fall because fighting the system is vastly more exhausting than dying.
Very much so.
But of course, the peace of the free fall doesn't last. The ground is coming fast.
Very fast.
It abruptly ends, leading us directly into the climax of the narrative, the shatter and the merciless reset.
The sequence where the loop terminates is where the format of the comic physically attacks the reader. It presents a total visual blackout.
Just pitch black.
Yeah. The entire panel is just a solid, velvet black cut directly down the center by a single, jagged, blindingly white line.
The art direction describes it as a massive crack in a pane of glass or a violent tear in the fabric of reality itself.
Right.
There's no text from the scenario voice describing fiery explosions or the impact of metal on dirt.
Yeah.
Just a stark visual representation of sudden, absolute destruction.
The scenario voice simply states, the timeline shatters. A blinding flash of white noise, and then absolute heavy silence. The loop terminates.
And David's audio track just delivers a sudden, sharp intake of breath, followed by a long, defeated sigh.
And then comes the ultimate gut punch, the final sequence of the script.
Yeah.
It is an exact, identical visual replication of the very first scene.
The exact same camera perspective.
Yeah.
The exact same gritty, sickly, green-gray lighting.
Yeah.
David sits slumped in the metal chair in the airport lounge, his hands buried in his graying hair. The styrofoam coffee cup beside him is trembling. The massive digital departure board glows with piercing white LEDs, and the time on the clock reads 7:00 a.m. again.
The automated scenario voice comes back in, sounding just as clinical and detached as before, announcing that the pieces are reassembling.
And the nauseating scent of industrial floor wax returns.
Yes.
And David's final thought of the script leans into this deeply tragic, almost corporate humor. He notes that the universe still demands a passenger for Seat 8F, and then he thinks, and I'm already late for my flight.
This raises an important question about how media portrays the cyclical nature of trauma. The identical nature of the opening and closing scenes doesn't just trap David, it mathematically traps you, the reader.
Right, because you literally scroll down and end up right where you started visually.
Exactly. By forcing your eyes to look at the exact same visual data you started with, the comic structure itself enforces the loop. You, the reader, realize that everything you just consumed, all of David's frantic struggles, his clever attempts at rebellion, his quiet moments of acceptance, it all amounted to absolutely nothing. The script resets, and the trauma begins again, mechanically, exactly as it did before.
It perfectly weaponizes visual repetition. The format itself becomes the monster.
Yes.
Contrasting that detached, automated scenario voice with David's exhausted terror creates an unbreathable narrative.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, there are no jump scares in Flight 109 to Inevitable.
Yeah.
There isn't a masked killer chasing him down the airplane aisle. The horror is simply the unbreakable mathematical structure of his reality.
It truly highlights how innovative storytelling mediums, like using scrolling thresholds to trigger conflicting audio tracks, can take standard existential dread and make it feel viscerally, physically immediate to the audience.
Absolutely.
It proves that true horror isn't always about a monster hiding in the dark. Very often, the most terrifying thing a human can experience is the total, absolute loss of agency in the broad daylight.
You can see the tragedy coming from miles away. You know exactly how it works, and you still can't do a single thing to stop it. And that leaves us with a lingering, incredibly unsettling thought to mull over, something we haven't even touched on yet. Think about the mechanical rules of the universe we just explored.
Okay.
The bleeding ticket acts as a magical anchor, forcing David to the sky. And when he physically runs to the exit doors, the spatial warp simply folds him back to the gate. The universe bends around his physical actions to redirect him.
Right. It corrals him back to the required path.
So what would actually happen if, at 7 a.m., David simply refused to stand up from that metal waiting area chair?
Oh, interesting.
What if he doesn't try to run to the exit? He doesn't take the ticket to the gate agent with the jagged smile. He just anchors himself to that chair. As 8.1 a.m. rapidly approaches, would the physical universe manifest hands and drag his body, inch by agonizing inch, down the jet bridge and onto the plane?
Or, if he absolutely fundamentally refused to occupy C8F, would the fabric of reality simply tear itself apart right there in the middle of Terminal B?
It's a terrifying hypothetical. Is the universe stronger than pure human stubbornness? Or does the loop actually require his reluctant, marching participation to function?
That is such a fascinating question to leave on.
So, what does this all mean? It means the mundane waiting room might actually be just as dangerous as the terrifying freefall. We'll leave you to think about that the next time you're sitting at an airport gate, listening to the clinical automated announcements echoing over the speakers. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.